So, good evening. First of all, I want to congratulate the organization of the Kosovo Architecture Festival. It is a pleasure for me to be here and an opportunity to reflect on the role of architecture in times of crisis. I'm a Portuguese architect, professor at the Faculty of Architecture of the University of Porto since the end of the last millennium, as I like to refer to the end of the 20th century. I have been teaching building construction, traditional materials, sustainability and circularity, and my main research focus has been construction history, as I am convinced that we can learn a lot from the past to build a better future. Traditional knowledge, or in our field, traditional knowledge about constructive systems and materials, can help to lower the impact of buildings and the building sector. Nothing new, the title of my communication has a double meaning. The first is related to the idea that a low-impact approach is nothing new. When humanity didn't have the contemporary technological resources, it was more sustainable. The second meaning is a direct relationship with the Portuguese association of which I am a founding member, called Nada Novo, nothing new, and the communication has several movements or acts, and nothing new will be one of them. But before entering the core of the presentation, I would like to reflect a little bit on this year's theme, the city after. What do you see in this image? For a Portuguese architect, reconstruction is not an abstract subject. On November 1, 1755, Lisbon suffered one of the greatest natural urban catastrophes in European history, an earthquake followed by a tsunami, followed by fire. The Lisbon earthquake posed exactly the question that this festival asks: what comes after destruction? Most people would think the answer was build the city again, but that is not quite true. The Marquis de Pombal reconstruction was also an opportunity to rethink street hierarchy, public space, seismic construction, governance, infrastructures. It was not simply rebuilding, it was redesigning. With a new urban model, new construction techniques, and a new political vision. And the usual laws and examples were later even applied to Porto, that is Portugal's second city, which didn't suffer from the earthquake but began intense urban renewal at the end of the 18th century. Lisbon reconstruction is arguably the first modern example of architecture and urbanism confronting reconstruction as a political, technical, and cultural project. Around the world, architecture is increasingly being called upon to rebuild. Whether after armed conflicts, environmental disasters, or economic collapses, reconstruction has become one of the defining architectural questions of our time. Yet rebuilding cannot simply means replacing what has been lost. It also requires rethinking our relationship with what remains. Every catastrophe is also a design question. In fact, I think we face a more complex problem today. In 1755, the challenge was primarily rebuilding the city. Today, we rebuild while confronting another crisis, the crisis of resources, the crisis of carbon, the crisis of extraction, the crisis of demolition. So the question changes, not simply how do we rebuild, but how do we rebuild without repeating the logic that helped produce our environmental crisis. And that brings me to the theme of my talk, circularity in architectural education and practice. as a small contribution in an effort to answer that question. I have no experience rebuilding after a conflict, so I am anchoring my presentation in what I do have experience with, mainly teaching, designing, and building. I divide my presentation in 4 movements. The first one, what are some of the challenges we face today, so in that sense of a framework. The second movement, some of my pedagogical experiences with students. The third one, the Nada Novo Association, so nothing new association. And at the end, an ongoing intervention as a methodological example. One part of the audience, I thought we would have more students, of our audience today was born in a world where sustainability concerns are a reality. Sustainable development as a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. We are in the era of the Anthropocene, even if there is no common consensus of when this era has started, if with the Industrial Revolution or much earlier with the Neolithic Agricultural Revolution. One thing we can't argue, the impact of human actions in the climate of the planet are affected. This is in Portugal, but you can see the increase of temperature. So we are trying to do the impossible, having one planet and spending the resources if we have 4 planets. And there are environmental social inequities, populations that are using the resources that should be of other populations that are producing more emissions than their own share. The building sector, the building environment, the humanized landscape are among the sectors that contribute most to emissions because, if we think about it, they support our way of life, where we live, where we work, where we move around, and even where we have fun. Most of our time is passed inside buildings. But there is a key shift in architecture. Operational energy still represents the largest share, but embodied emissions are becoming increasingly important as buildings become more energy efficient. What is the implication? As operational energy decreases, material become a larger proportion of a building lifetime impact. So, what can we do to lower the impact of the buildings? Extraction also transforms landscapes, and material extraction is a planetary issue. According to the United Nations, material extraction has more than tripled since the 70s. Buildings consume more or less half of all extracted raw materials worldwide. Construction generates one of the largest waste streams in many countries. The promotion of a circular economy is not only about carbon. It concerns biodiversity, water, like we see before, landscapes, waste, local economies. Perhaps the most sustainable material is the one that already exists. Demolition generates, like we saw, a lot of waste, so you must think of reusing of buildings, so the adaptive reuse, as the greenest building may already be standing. Reuse of part of structures, so keep the foundations, the slabs, the walls, instead of demolition, even when you need to change the interior. And also reuse of components, beams, doors, windows, bricks, tiles, like we have. So promoting the reuse with material banks and make reuse as one architecture of continuity, where reuse is not only material but also spatial, historical and cultural. This is Sala Beckett, one of the most complete examples of the reuse in architecture. But in fact, a material is never only technical. It is environmental, social, cultural, and spatial at the same time. Materials are social. Materials determine who can build, who owns the knowledge, whether construction depends on imported products or local skills, whether buildings can be repaired. Taking this in consideration, in 2019, I decided to create an optional curricular unity at FAUP that is called Circular Construction, Conscientious Design and Certification. For me, the emphasis was in the conscientious design, but I needed to have a name that could be more identifiable with the theoretical framework, so the big name that I decided. At the same moment, I was made responsible for the faculty participation in a construction fair, whose theme for that year was sustainability, so I decided to articulate the new curricular unity with the participation in that fair. And it was made with a set of parallel initiatives with participation of students and gathering professionals related with traditional building methods, mainly remedy earth and wood. Not a problem? Okay. Research was the starting point, learning from what exists. Portugal has a rich tradition of building with wood, but as usually is not apparent, it's not acknowledged. We still have in city centers some houses where the upper floors use wooden construction, a traditional technique that we can find worldwide and from different eras. In Portugal, we call it taipa and tivic. In English, it's usually called what end up, and you certainly have your own terms. Then, it was time to find the way of showing all the different traditional techniques and also having the setup for the workshops. So, this is the square in the construction fair. If we want to promote sustainability, it made no sense to get new materials. So, you made contacts and got used wood from a company nearby Porto. So we are gathering the wood. Then, with the help of the other company, we cut the wood in parts needed for the workshops. And on the first workshop, we had the students that were making the different models of different types of traditional systems. Some of the students, I think it was the first time they had a hammer in their hands, and they liked it a lot. So, by the end, we finished to have whole models. In some situation, you also use some more other tools, and in the construction fair, we had all set up to begin. So a lot of people who are stopping and participating, many with no architectural background, but with the memories of the grandparents' houses that, and they wanted to know more. For the remedy earth, we had the help of another company that brought materials and the people to teach and to help. And also these participations in those fairs were a way of making contacts, new people that afterwards will be working with us in other situations. So just not to take. The plan was to make 3 type of blocks, so 3 of these, of remedy earth. But we end up, by the end of 3 days workshop, with only 1, but feeling that we had accomplished our objectives. it looks like a cake, but it's because it's made with different kind of earths. In 2021, as soon as COVID allowed it, we made 2 workshops in FAUP, one about earthen construction and second one about wooden construction. Ponto Parágrafo is the association of Diogo, that is here also in Pristina, one of our Lina Fellows in this edition. For the earthen construction, the greatest challenge was to find the earth locally, as in the north of the country we didn't have a tradition of rammed earth, and there is always a very objective reason for the fact. So, this workshop had the contribution of Miguel Mendes, a Portuguese architect that has a degree from Crater in Paris, in Grenoble, sorry. We made some initial tests of different moisture content of the earth, so the participants could assess the behavior of the soil. As the soil was not ideal, we needed to make some stabilization with air lime. So they are mixing the earth, so it began. And the participants then will start to make a counter that would be used for the barbecues that the students do every month in the faculty, and that counter still exists today. So just to... So, by the end, it's finished, and with just a note saying, don't throw it away, and it's still there today. The second workshop was about wooden traditional construction. It had a particular focus on the connection details. Learning from Portuguese traditions. For this workshop, because of several constraints, we needed to use a new wood. We end up with a model of a traditional tabik, interior partition wall, that was used by the students in the following year festival along the ones from the 2019 workshop. And like it was COVID time, you were like that. So one last example of these workshops, in this case addressing another sustainable strategy, the use of growing materials. But as we needed to make blocks, the first work was to make molds, a lot of molds. As we decide to use hemp and experiment different formulation of hemp blocks using lime, cement and pozzolanic ashes, and we intend to make tests, we need several blocks with the same formulation, so 7 in the case and 15 different formulations. So a lot of blocks. Like in the first example, the idea was to involve the visitants of the construction fair, usually looking for technological novelties. By the end of the day, we had the 105 blocks made. Sadly, we never got to the test phase. In the following years, we did some other different workshops, not so much as I would like, because I think that a hand-on approach is needed to better understand what the challenge and the possibilities are. And as time is running, I cannot say because this was during the interval, it was already open, so I don't have the time. I will go to the 2 last examples, starting with nada novo, so nothing new. The organization of workshops and several open classes in from 2019 onwards led to the creation of a network of persons with similar interests. One of the similar interests was the reuse. In 2023, we formed the association Nada Novo. We research on reuse within vernacular, contemporary and future construction, and we intend to foster a more wider reuse practice in Portugal involving industry, academy and in the public sphere. Our association seeks to contribute to bridge the subject between politicians and policymakers, construction professionals, supply chains and general public. It is adopting a transdisciplinary approach with open and inclusive participatory activities that include workshops, experimental construction, training, exhibition and publications. Seeking to contribute to the creation of networking and mapping of demolition contractors, suppliers, artisans and technicians connected with construction and component reuse. The association is also active in the field of artistic practice, visual and performance art to reach a broader public. So this was the first project developed by Nada Novo, taking advantage of the freedom that artistic creation provides to critically explore processes and outputs. As it had funding granted by DG Artes, a Portuguese program that helps visual arts and architectural creations. The theme was the origin of materials for reuse, so the name Peças Desgarradas, that is stray pieces, the origins of the materials. We choose 5 distinct examples of the modern mind and promote a set of visits that allow for a wider questioning and visual mapping. What are the minds, what typology, what values, what pupil, and so on. So one type is the safeguard kind of mine. This is Banco de Materiais in Porto with elements from traditional buildings. The second type is the exploration kind, someone that gets for selling everything. The third kind is a waste management facility that collects waste from several places and then makes the triage. And the fourth type is the antique selling, so elements that have cultural value and they are available for purchase. The second part of the workshop, one of the outputs of the workshop, an artistic interpretation of the material paths from buildings to intermediate location and to a possibility new building. So we project the map of Porto upside down of the original situation that you used to see it, and then we were just marking in that map what are the paths of the materials. It's not. So, the second part of the workshop, then several months later, addressed that possible second life of a building component. It was called Peças Resgatadas, Salvaged Parts. The public workshop began with the inventory of a set of available resources that were procured by the Nada Novo team. In reuse, a project begins with an inventory and continues with assessment of the possibilities that each material offers. The 15-day workshop was a participatory process. The participants were changing during time. The plans also changed and changed. The design was made at the same time as the construction. So what I'm seeing there is two parts there of a skylight that came from city center, from a demolition in a old building. The benches are made with some elements from the roads. The beams were given by a demolition company also. So everything. The metallic parts, those were bought in the exploitation. Okay. So some pictures of the process and the finish. The materials and time of all that was done, and the end, the ability to make the forum in the place that it was built during the previous days. And we're discussing reuse. And the last movement is the Orange Grove House, so Casa de Laranjal in Portuguese. And it's a family house, and the intervention presents itself as an opportunity to research in practice, to have a laboratory of construction to test all the theoretical assumptions. So the project does not begin with an architectural program. It begins with an inventory. Sorry. Design follows the material reality of the place rather than imposing an abstract ideal. This happens at two levels, at the existing building and the reuse of materials and components. And these are some photos from the 2000, the beginning, the end of the beginning of 2000 and even in the 80s. So old photos, and during this time, the house that was old, that is in color in the map, that was from one family, became divided in two families, and so only that part remained in one property. And with that, it lost one of the facades, so one of the facades is connected to the other house, that is the pink one, and it's in a more or less ruined state. In the beginning of 2000, it received a new roof, but the rest is not, it's not done. So it's divided in three parts because it was a set of three houses that were built between the 18th century and the end of the 19th century. The upper level, the mid level, and the down level. So the three with all the parts that we have. From 2023, and we can say that COVID had some implication on this, because after being held inside buildings, we realized that we need to be more close to the outside spaces, in this case that already own. So we began the intervention of the houses, first just taking all the vegetation and the rocks that were against the house, and then trying to make the inventory of everything that was there. So one of more available material were stones, like everywhere. We have a lot of stones, and we could already have used stones in these new windows and these new doors, but they are around. So some of them were in the streets for several years, but they managed to be inside and transforming the part, so reuse. Some of stones needed to be bought because we needed smaller, not so thick stones that the ones we had. So we bought some stones, also used stones, so not new stones, and the guys were working hard to do it. But also we have a lot of wood, some windows, some doors. I try to reuse this whole door in the place of that new one, but it was a defeat because the carpenter said that if it was to reuse, it would take a year to do the door. If it was to do a new one, would be more quick. So, but I have a private supermarket of used parts, so I can go and see what I can do. So I make the inventory of old beams and changing the design, so everything that is in blue, some elements that can be reused from previous construction of the house. Sometimes people knows that I will reuse stuff and will give some more beams. And I found, because the inventory is never over, I found that I have a lot of wood that was saw, but that could allow for doing something like this, to be the stairs. And when you use materials, it's not only because of sometimes there is emotional value. So I recognized parts of the wall of my grandmother room, so I kept them aside because I want to do something with that. And in some situations, we make the building in a different order. So we add a door and we are building a wall around a door. That door was there for, I don't know, a long time. So in certain way, I can divide this presentation in. I can divide this presentation in three great or big parts. One about learning, and another one about sharing, another one about building. And as end up, I would say that circularity is not simply a strategy for reducing waste and to save money. It is a different conception of architectural authorship. Rather than asking what we can add to the world, it asks what the world already offers and how design can reveal the latent value of what exists. In an age increasingly defined by reconstruction, adaptation and scarcity, this may prove to be the architecture's most necessary cultural shift. And returning to the beginning of the presentation, we could say that every act of reconstruction should begin with an inventory, with a survey. That inventory should include buildings, but also materials, skills, landscapes, and memories and identity. The city after crisis should not be built from new resources alone, but from new relationships with existent ones. Architecture should be grounded in an ethic of attention to materials, to place, to memories, and to communities. Before asking what should be built anew, we must learn to ask what already exists, what still has value, and what deserves another life. And I would like to thank my distant ancestors and my parents who bequeathed me their home and their taste for the culture of the past. And I would also like to thank the guys who, as well as sweating, put their love into what they were doing in the house. So Pedro, Rui, Reinaldo, António, Filipe, Cristiano, and some others. So thank you very much.